Welcome back to this new episode of DaVinci Resolve 18, in which we talk about color grading and color page as a whole. Now, in the first lesson, we did discuss the balancing and normalization, or I should say normalization and balancing, which are two integral parts in grading your image and are oftentimes the essentials, right? It's the starting point to get your image to a neutral point. If you have not seen that lesson first, I would highly suggest you to go back to lesson 1, watch that, and then jump into this one. Well, so today in this lesson, we, as the title suggests, we will be talking about the shot matching. How do we match shots? Now, why is this important? This is important because you will have sometimes footage where obviously one clip it's not matched to another clip because of a number of reasons. It could be very different reasons. It could be different cameras. It could be different lighting conditions, different setups. There is a lot of different reasons for that in happening. So it's always good to understand how shot matching works and how we can effectively implement that in our workflow. So now, before we start talking about that, we need to understand that it's good to build a strategy and a shot matching strategy specifically, in which before we do start a grade, and to sort of come up with what is our plan going to be, how we are going to approach this. And that's dependent on a few factors, one of them being the genre of the project that you're editing. So obviously a documentary, it's a little bit different from a narrative film. So there's a few considerations to take in place. But generally speaking, there is a few things that we can consider. One being take your footage and then balance all the different shots in a sequence. Now, this workflow, it basically assumes that you're shot by shot, you take the shot by shot approach and you start to balance all your clips. And by doing that, you're obviously going to match all your different clips because you are taking all of them to a neutral point. Now, when is this the strategy that I would use? Well, this is a strategy definitely appropriate when you're shooting a documentary. Why do I say that? Because as I was explaining just a few minutes ago, a documentary is you don't have controlled environment, controlled lighting. It's not like a movie set where you have much more control over what you're filming. So oftentimes you don't even have the time. You're trying to capture a moment, or you're trying to capture a specific emotion, right? So you don't have the time to prepare for these things. So that's why oftentimes when you have footage from, say, a documentary feature or anything like that, you definitely are going to maybe take this approach where you're taking all the different clips and you're balancing them one by one. Now, as I said, this is a very time-consuming process, yet it is one strategy that you could definitely take. The other option that you could consider is to adjust only the mismatched shots in a sequence. So what does this mean? This means that it's a much more common approach, generally speaking. And this is an approach where, say, you are matching shots from a narrative film. So it's a narrative film. So you're working, obviously a cinematographer worked on it, and then you're noticing that in the sequence, most of the shots are matched, but there is a few shots that are not matched or mismatched. So what you're doing now, say you have 10 clips and 7 of them or 8 of them share the same look. However, 2 of them don't. You are going just to basically take those mismatched 2 clips and then match them to the rest of the sequence. So that's another strategy you could take. So your point of reference, basically, out of those 10 clips, it's these other 8 clips that all share the same look. So, as I said, this is much more common. Oftentimes, it's much more a practice, obviously, that it's more common to standard grading practice. However, that is another option you could take. Now, another option you could take is to select a reference shot. And also, this is a pretty strong way to go about it, where you can have maybe more than one clip that you think this could be a strong reference shot, and then you want to choose one that you think, okay, so that is the reference shots we want to use for this specific sequence. So you're taking that, okay, so say you have 6 different clips. Out of those 6, one of them is your reference shot, and then you're going to match everything to that specific reference shot that you chose. Say that was the shot that you like the best. Now, a quick tip here is that if you're going to select a reference shot, a master reference shot, it's always best to take an establishing shot or a wide shot, because you're doing that because if you select a master shot, or as I said, a wide shot, you have an actual physical place, a physical space where you can see the actual set, you could see the actors, you could see the lighting, you could see the setup. If you instead choose a master shot, say a reference shot, right? Your reference shot would be something like a close-up. Well, that is not as ideal because a close-up does not have as much, you don't have as much real estate to play with, really, and really it doesn't give you as much information about the environment as a wide shot would. So that's a pro tip right there. And finally, another option that you could consider is to basically take a clip that you think it will be the closest to your intended grade. So say you have a look in mind. So this is the look I'm going for. And that's what I'm thinking to be the look for the movie or the project. Could be a commercial, could be a trailer. So that is the look. So you're taking that specific shot and then matching everything to that shot because you, as I said, that is the look that you're going for. So it's much more easier for you to match then everything to that shot. So I hope this makes sense. We're talking about this because, as I said, before you start your project, you don't want to just go and start shot matching everything. Because that wouldn't make sense if you worked on a movie and you see that the DP shot a lot of sequences share the same look. You wouldn't go there and match everything. If you see that, say we take a scene or a sequence has a very, very common ground to start with, you have a very common tone and mood, all you got to do in that case would be just to take those mismatched shots and match them. Alternatively, as I said, if it's a documentary, it makes a lot of sense, if all the shots are different, of course, to then take them one by one and really balance everything. So that is something that you always want to consider before you start working on your project, because as I said, you want to have a strategy in place. Time is important, time is money, and you don't want to spend your time, right, trying to figure out afterwards, oh, I made a mistake because I could have just gone this way instead. So that is a really, really pro tip. So save this part of this video and listen to it a few more times because it's going to save you so much time in your future projects. And this is very important because that's what the training inside of Blackmagic talks about in the book as well, where they go around this. Once again, if you're looking for the material, you can find it down the link down below in my description. So with that said, now let's start actually doing something now. So let's go through, explore a little bit more, and how do we actually use shot matching. So first thing I always do I go here on my workspace and then I just click reset UI layout. Now nothing is happening because I do this all the time before I always start a project. But for you, always go workspace, reset UI layout, just in case you want to go back to your default settings. And now let's start to talk about some of the ways that we can match our shots. So what I'm going to do now, it's to my timeline here, it's the 01 main timeline. I'm going to change this from here to balanced timeline. So I'm going to come here. And you can see we have a series of clips here in our clips. You have a bunch. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about flags and how flags work. Now, let's not confuse flags with markers because you can see that these are flags and they're not markers. And you can see those on all those clips following here. And before we start talking about flags, let me tell you quickly what's the difference between flags and markers, because you could say, that's very similar. What is the difference? Why can't I use markers? Now, the thing with flags is that when you apply your flag to a clip, the flag gets applied into your clip uniformly, so as a whole. So now your whole clip is flagged. The difference with markers is that when you apply a marker to a clip, you're applying it to a specific frame or a specific length or duration inside of your clip. That is a little bit different because, as I said, the flag is inside of your clip as a whole, and then you can go between different pages and you can see that your clip is still flagged, whether you're in the edit, cut page, color page, and that is why flags are very, very useful tools inside of our color page. Second question, why would you use flags? What is the purpose of flags? Well, these are very solid organizational tools for us when we're in the color page to work more effectively. So for instance, let me give you an example. Say you're working on a Monday on clips where you decided that this clip, and this clip, these are the clips that I want to have them for a flashback sequence. So something like that. And in that case, what you would do is to take these specific clips, add them a flag, and sort of color code them. So decide a specific color flag, and that way I know that on Monday I'm just dedicating my time to these 3 clips. Maybe a different day, on a Friday, I can work on other clips where I need to expose them, change their exposure, or like normalize them. There is something about them that I need to change, or the contrast, or some other type of operation. So I'm going to group these together and color code them in a different flag. So the use for this now is that we can add flags, as I just said, and then what you can do is to then filter them out. And here in your clips view, you can then filter, say, the green flags or the blue flags. So let me show you that how that works very quickly. So I can come here on my clip 4 over here, and we want to add a flag. There is a few different ways we can do that. I'm going to right click here, and you can see we have a bunch of options. I'm going to click here, flags, and then you can choose a color. So we're going to say green. Now we added a flag, and say this is our clip where we want to normalize it, okay, for tomorrow. Then we know we have a few clips. So say also clip number 5, we also want to normalize. So we want to add a flag to this one as well. Another way you can do the same instead of right clicking is by pressing G, which is the shortcut. But what's happening here is that now this is a different color. So how do I change the color? I can double click on the flag here, and then you can see you have the color. So I can match it to a green. You also have a notes tab here where you can add notes, which is very, very useful. Say this shot needs overexposure, or this shot needs more contrast, whatever. So you can add your notes. You can also remove your flags here. That's how you remove them. So I can click done. Now we can see we have 2 green flags. So if I come here on my 3rd clip, say this is the 3rd clip I want to work on as well, and color code them to these other ones here. So if I press G once again, you can see that what's happening here, that we keep getting a blue flag rather than something that matches these ones. So let me double click here. You can either change it here, but the problem is that you have to always double click and go back and always change them. So how do we change the color by default? So let me remove the flag. You can go here on your edit, and then you can see here you have your markers, which we just discussed, which shortcut is M, we'll be discussing later on. And here you have the G, okay, which is our flags. You can come here on this drop down, and now the color I select, it's going to be the default color for the flags that we add now in the color page. So if I press G again, now we can see that we have a yellow here flag added to it. Whatever color you want to add by default, it will be added now because you changed it in the edit page. You can also select multiple clips here and flag them all together. So say I select that one, then I press Command, and I also choose this one. Now if I press here, if I press G, what's going to happen is that we added, and you could see that now we added another flag. So we have, now in this case, since this was yellow, yeah, it's the same color, but say it was a different color, you would have 2 for this one as well. So now that's basically how it works. I can always come over here, and I can always change them if need might be to a different color. You can always double click and do that as well. But these are just different options for you to play around with. And that's how you add flags in different ways. Now let's sort them, and let me show you how easy it is now to, as we discussed, to color code them and see how we can filter them out and sort them in our clips here. So I can come here. You can see here we have our clips. I can come in this drop down menu, and then you have a very, very much like a few different options here to work with ungraded clips, modify clips, whatever. I'm going to come here on flat clips, and then you can see that now we can sort them by no flag, any flag, blue flag, cyan, all the different colors. So if I wanted to say just the green ones, I can click on green and say on Wednesday, I'm working on these specific clips that we flag green, and you have them all available here. Then say you're done with them, you can come back here on clips. You can always change to a different color. So if I click here on this marked clips, here on flag clips, if I click on yellow, what happens now is that it's going to add the yellow, but the green are also there. That's because you want to make sure, if you come to flag 2, because now you selected 2 colors, to uncheck green, now you only have the ones that have yellow in them. Now, some of them you can see they have green as well, but that's because they have both flags. So you can see kind of the pattern here and how you can really customize, all right, based on your workflow, what you want to have available and what you want to work with. So this is very, very useful, and it's very, I would strongly suggest you to work with flags inside of the color page because it can save you a ton of time and keep you organized. So that's a little bit about that. Then you can always come here and change colors as you wish. As I said, you can, I keep clicking on the wrong one here for some reason. But you can always come here and then see I made a selection here. I can even say no flag there. You can see now you have the clips with absolutely no flags in them. So that is how you work with that. So I'm going to keep it to green here, and I'm going to keep this selection of clips in here. Now I can select all my different clips. And now let's talk about the next topic, which is what this lesson is about, which is shot matching. Now, how do we apply a shot match? The first way I'm going to show you is to use the auto feature from Resolve, which is very powerful, uses math, science, and algorithms, right, to figure out how we can match shots. Why is this useful? It is useful because if you're on set and you quickly need to match 2 shots, or if you have a client coming over and you quickly want to show them a specific sequence, so obviously you want your clips to be matched, you can do this very, very quickly. However, I wouldn't suggest relying just on the auto feature. You still want to make tweaks, and I'm going to show you how you use and what's the workflow around that. So we have these 2 clips here of this 2. This is the rhinos here, and here you have the horse. And what we're trying to do here is to match one clip to the next. Okay, as you can see. Now, this is what I did earlier. So before we started the tutorial. So this node here, I am going to delete it. So what you're going to start with, it's something like this, as you can see. Now, this is what we have right now. We have, as I said, rhinos, and we have our horse here. And now, how do we... First, we need to select which clip do we want to match to which goes back to the beginning of this lesson, what I said. Find your reference frame first, and then choose which clip do you want this look, the colder look, or do you want something that is warmer and more contrasty, like this shot specifically. So first, try to figure out which is your reference frame. Okay, so your master reference. In this case, I like this better, so it's going to be, this one is our reference frame. So what we're going to do now, we are going to match this clip to the clip with the horse. So what we're going to do is we are going to select this clip over here. Okay, we can see how here we have 2 nodes, as I discussed, the normal, which stands for normalization, and then the balance, which is balancing. If you don't know what I'm talking about right now, I highly suggest to watch the episode before this, because we explained all of that in detail, how you normalize a clip, how you balance it. So that's what that is. Now, in this specific lesson, we want to now work more with nodes and keep things separated. And this is why we have our normalization done here and our balancing done here. And now we want to color match 2 different clips. So I'm going to do that in its own node. So how do you add a node? Well, you select the last node here. Say you want to add a node after this. So you select this node, then you right click and you go down here where it says add node. You have a few different options. We want to add a standard corrector node. So we're going to add the serial node here. So add node, add serial. Alternatively, don't do it like that, by the way. I suggest to press Option S, and that adds a node. Now, it's very good practice to keep all your nodes labeled properly. So you can come here, right click, and then say node label. And I am going to say shot match. There we go. And then you can also decide the size here, move them around. And now we have our own node for the shot match. Okay, so now that we have our node, how do we, once again, we talked about how do we match this clip to the horse? Let's do this. We select our clip here, which is the clip we want to match to the horse. And then I am going to right click on the clip I want to match it to. Right click on it. Then you have a few different options. What we care about is this one over here. Shot match to this clip. And once I do that, look at the viewer over here, how that's going to change instantly. So click it. And you can see how quickly our shot here just, right? It became immediately warmer, and Resolve does its best to match it to this clip, in this case, this clip over here. And you can see how quickly we did that. Let me bring my scopes here so we can see exactly what happened. So I'm going to come here, my UI, colorize, so we can see our waveform here. And now you can see that it's pretty close. It's pretty close. So let me make this a little bigger. It is pretty close. However, there is obviously a little bit of differences. I can see there is a little more contrast here, especially in the shadows. Well, here it's a little bit more, it's not as contrasty in the shadows. So let's adjust a little bit and let's match them a little bit better. By the way, to move between clips, I am going with the up and down arrow. That's a shortcut, how to move quickly between them. And I'm looking at my waveform monitor, my waveform scope, to sort of figure out what is their tonal range. Okay, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, once again, go back to lesson 1 and all of this is explained. How to read the waveform, how to read scopes, etc. All of that. Great. Now, let's start matching them a little better. First thing I'm going to do is I can see also, based on the waveform, that I need to take down the lift on this clip and then raise the gamma to match them. So let's get started. So I'm going to take the lift down a bit to something like that. And immediately I can see that now, okay, we added a little bit more contrast. The second thing I'm going to do now is to raise my gamma a bit to something like that. So now we should have, okay, a little bit of a better image. And then what I'm going to do next is there's a little bit of red. So let's drag it away from the red towards the cyan just to kind of balance it a little better, the image. Okay, something like that. You can see what a huge difference that makes. And now I can look at it. Okay, a little bit better. These are very, very subtle changes. Obviously, you don't want to go like that because that would be excessive, as you could see. And you can figure out how much to move by. So something like that works for me. Perfect. And then what I want to do next is to come on my log wheels here, and we are going to drag down our shadows a tiny bit here. And then my low range as well, to extend it a bit to something like that. You don't want to go too far with it, so maybe bring this up a bit. And obviously, I can see that now we definitely added much more detail and contrast, especially to the darker areas, to the shadows inside of our image, where earlier was a little bit less contrasty, almost sort of, I wouldn't say washed out, but a little bit. We needed definitely, those blacks needed to be a little bit richer, and we need to take them down. So now this is just a quick way to show you how you can obviously you shouldn't fully rely on your auto match feature. You want that as a starting point to get you, it's the ballpark. It's to take you to a very good point. And then from there, you want to make adjustments. Obviously, this is done very quickly here. You can always fine-tune things out and sort of figure out how much you can push and pull and all of that. And then really play a bit and sort of figure out how much you want to. You can even go back here, then add a little bit to the gamma. So really figure out how to best match them. This is a very quick way on how, look at the starting point, look at where we took it, just in a few minutes. So that is the power of the auto match inside of Resolve. And this is very useful, and I highly suggest you to, once again, use it when you are on a rush and you definitely want to get a starting point. Then look at your image and then refine it even further. Now that we used the auto match feature inside of Resolve, the next thing that we're going to learn is how do we match shots using stills. And that's the next thing I'm going to show you now. So what we're going to do, I'm going to come to this clip right here of this two men, you could see here with the horse. And as I'm describing here, the playback. And what we're going to do now is to use this as a still, as our reference, okay? That's going to be our reference shot. Then to match this clip to this reference shot right here. So, and I'm going to show you how that can accurately be done inside of Resolve very, very quickly. So with this clip selected now, I can come here in the viewer and I can right click and I say grab still. And you can see here that is a few numbers. That basically, those numbers mean that which track this clip is from, and then what is the clip's order in the timeline. So this in our timeline will be clip number 10. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, V1. So it's 1, 10, and then the one number afterwards means that how many stills have we created off of this specific one, which in this case it's only one. So that's what that means. Now we can also come here, you could see you could load it like that, but I'm going to show you first how we can come to our selected still that we just added, and here I can say change label, and then I can rename it, and I can say this is our match reference, just like that. And you want to rename it so just in case you know what you're referring to, so which one you're using specifically, and it's always useful, and you always want to do that. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to go to my clip, which is this one. So this is the clip that I want to match to my match reference. And what is the advantage of doing it through this way? Well, as I said, the auto match feature is very useful because you're able to very, very quickly do adjustments on the fly. But there might be times where you want to do it yourself and just physically look at your reference and then match it yourself, so more manually go about it. So now to do this, what we're going to do, instead of using the color wheels that we have here, our primary color wheels, I am going to change it to the primary color bars. Very important. These two are related. Okay, so any change I make to my primary color bars here, it's also going to affect our color wheels. That is, why would I use this? Well, because you have much more precision, right, for each channel. As you can see, the color wheels, also the color bars, this one right here, also called the printer lights, you can target so much more specifically and with more detail each channel, because that's the point of the color bars. As you can see it here, you have it for your lift, gamma, and gain. Now, one very, very important thing to understand here is that if I am going to change the Y or luminance of, say, either the lift, gamma, or gain, that affects the image differently than it would with the color wheels here on the master wheels, because the master wheels affect that uniformly, so they change the overall saturation, RGB saturation of your image. On the other hand, the color bars here, they just affect the luminance. So if I'm changing the Y value on either of these three, it's going to affect just the luminance. So that is very, very important. Another quick thing, you can either drag these bars like that, or you can use your scroll wheel. See how it's moving right now? I'm just using my scroll wheel. So all you got to do is hover over either one of them and then just use your scroll wheel. And that way you can have much more refined precision. Alternatively, you can click and drag just like that, but why would you want to do that? So let me reset both of them So you can see now we are back to our starting point. Alternatively, you can always go here to your reset all. And let's get started. Now that we know we're going to use our color bars, the next thing I'm going to do here, instead of my waveform, I am going to use the parades. Now, once again, parades are very similar to the waveform. There is a difference though, that our channels are now represented individually. So we can see our red, green, and blue channel, which in this case I wanted because I want a clear match. I am trying to match it based on our reference image here. So let's do that. So now that we have our clip number 6 here loaded in our viewer, what I want to do now, I want to double click on my match reference here, and look what happens now. We have our reference shot loaded into our viewer. So now we have the wipe mode. By the way, you can click and hold, and you can wipe between the two clips, as you can see right over here. Not just that, but you also have different wipe options. We went through this in the first lesson when we just gave it an overall overview, and I promise that as we go through, you will learn all the different options. And this is how you basically go through your image wipe here, because you have different options. You have also this, if you want to go vertically, diagonally, if you want to overlay them. So you have a very, very different options that you could use, and sort of like whatever works best for you. Every colorist is different. So for me, I'm just going to keep it to the standard basic one, but it's a good, you can always explore and look at all the different options available to you right here. So that is just a plus added on. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about is that you can see that sometimes, for me, used to be that this used to bother me a lot, because you have your match reference on this side and you have your clips here. So I feel that the images on your viewer are kind of inverted, because I would think that what I would like my image to be this side and my reference to be on the other side, since it's closer to my reference here. So how I can do that is by pressing Option W, you can invert them. So if this works best for you, works better, you can do that as well. In case, see, because now these are closer and our image is here. Now, in this case, I'm not going to do this because I can't see my character, so I'm going to keep them like that. But that is another option that you do have available and that you could just very quickly use. All right, so now let's talk about the scopes, because we haven't talked enough about it. Now, if you look at the scopes here, you can see that as I'm wiping, look what happens here in the parade. So you can see that there is a line going across. And do you know what that is? I'll give you 3 seconds. Okay, if you don't know, or if you guessed it, basically the parade here is showing you both of the clips that you have loaded. Okay, so it's showing you, I'm going to do a clear, concise line here. You can see that on the left, this, okay, over here is our image, and on the right, we have a reference. And we have that for all 3 channels. So for red, for the green, and for the blue. And obviously, by wiping, you can see that reflected even better. And basically, why would I want to use this? Why I changed to parades instead of waveform? Well, because it's a easier representation, and it's very good to accurately match. We're able to match much, much better to our clip, to our reference. Okay, so that is the reason why. So now on my clip 6, I'm going to operate inside of this node right here, that, as you could see, and I can rename this, right? I can go here on node label and I can give it a name. Now, before I do that, you can also add a shortcut to your node. It is not a current shortcut, a hotkey for adding a node label, but you could do that by going to DaVinci Resolve and then keyboard customization here, and then you can see you have a bunch of options. Then you can search for what you're looking for. So in this case, I'm going to say node here, and then I'm going to say node label. Let me see. You should have it here. Label. Color nodes. There we go. Label selected node. And then you can add a shortcut to it. So in this case, over here, I'm just going to press tab, okay? Because it's one of those hotkeys in our keyboard that it's not assigned to anything. So then I'm going to say save, and then here you can add a preset name. So in this case, I'm going to say here, I'm going to say GM, and then preset, and then say preset. Cool. And then I'm going to say okay. And now it saves that inside here. And then you can always go back. You can create as many presets as you want. And then here you can obviously also delete it in case you don't want it anymore. So, but just in case that you know it's there. Now I can close. Now what I can do, I can press tab, and now it already knows that I added I can rename or label. See, node label, my node. And then we can call this, since we're trying to match, we can say match here. So I can type match. Now we renamed our node over here. Great. So now that we've done all these steps, now it's time to finally get going on matching the two, matching our shot to our reference. Let's get started. Now, looking here at our parade, we can see already that we have we can see the blue channel right away. That is an enormous difference between the two. And then also the green and the red. Now, the goal is not to match them exactly the same, because it's never going to happen. That's just impossible, because you got to look at the context of your image. Every image is different. So it's impossible to have them exactly identical. You can get very close, but the point is to analyze and look at, right, the image that you're trying to match it to, like study the relationship between all the different channels, and then try to replicate that within your image as well. So for this, for instance, let's match the shots. Obviously, this is too blue and this is very orange right now, so let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do here is let's look at the luminance levels. I am going to come here on my left, and on my Y, the luminance, I'm going to take that down a bit. And you can see we can darken. I'm always looking at my parade. I'm looking at the green channel. You don't want to go too far down. So something like that works. By the way, I am using my mouse scroll wheel to move the different values on my printer lights here, or color bars. The next thing we're going to do, you can see that the blue channel on our reference image is way too high, while in our actual selected clip, while the reference image is much lower. So here on the gain, I am going to lower the blue. And I am going to sort of equalize it. So match it to that. And now you can see that our image is very, very green. And that's happening because of the other values here. So what I'm going to do, I am going to raise now my red channel to sort of warm it up a bit. And now you can see that we're getting around there. Now we need to also raise our gain in our green channel here a tiny bit. Something like that. It's a little excessive. So I'm going to, for now, keep it to a value here. I'm going to raise it not too much. Something like this should work. You always want to find a perfect spot. Something like that should do it for us. And then with the red, you can push and pull a little bit to find around there. Around there is very good for us. Now that we have that, I can also come here on my left and raise it a little bit so that we bring a little bit more in our shadows. Okay, don't want to go overboard with it. Something like that. And now we can see that we are very, very close match between the two clips. As you can see, even the terrain. What I'm going to do is also raise just a tiny bit more in my gamma, the reds, and then take the blue here on my gamma. A little down now, it's too much. Something like that should do it. And now you can see that we have a very, very close match. Now, once again, you can always adjust it a little bit if you think that it's a little too much. You can always go either way, even with the red here. If it's too much, then raise the green here. But you get the point. It's a lot of iteration. It's a lot of figuring out and push and pulling a bit. And it's very easy to go overboard. So you want to always... Okay, so that's pretty good. We're at a point where our clips are in a good spot here. I'm going to raise my gamma a little more to something like that. You can see. And then my blues can come a little bit down here. Like that. And now we are a very close match, as you could see. Okay. And we can intercut between these two clips. Obviously, you can always go back and really adjust things up, but that's how you can match clips together, right? By adding a still, having a reference. So that's where we started with. This is where we took it. Having a reference image here, and then matching our selected clip to our reference image. So that is our way of doing it. So that is really, really cool. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is that now you can add grades to whatever clip you want. So I can come here on the image wipe. So as long as the clips are matched, everything is balanced and matched, now whatever creative look we want to add, that's going to work. So if I come here, you can see on my reference clip that we had earlier, now we can come here and activate the contrast. You can see that now it's more contrasty. And what I can do, I can even copy this value by going here, Command C for copying. Okay, so we copied the contrast here. Then I can come on my clip here, and then I can add a serial node, another node, by right-clicking and saying Add Node, and then you can add a serial, and then I can come here and then press Command V to paste. And now we pasted our contrast, and you can see that I can, by activating it over here, and then if I go through my clips, I'm going to show you right now, I can now quickly show you how you can quickly match all your clips in your timeline. Now, once again, if you feel like that the colors are a little bit off, or you're still, it's iteration. That is what color correction, color grading is. You can go back if you feel like this is a little bit either too, you want a little more red. So you can go here, and then you can go back and look. See, now it's even closer. So really, it's about finding the good point, and then once it's matched, as I said, it doesn't matter because you're able to really add any creative effects that you want. So that's a little bit about how you match clips using stills. Now, we were able to auto match our clips, and we were able to do that with a still. The next way I'm going to show you how we can match clips, it's by using just the timeline, because we don't have to necessarily add a still, right, to do that match. And that is so we're going to take here, we have clip 4, which is the clip that we want to match to our clip here, which is this one, which is already balanced, as you can see. And what I'm going to do is, obviously I'm going to do this once again with Parade, because we have that flexibility that we spoke about, which is the red, green, and blue channels individually. So we can precisely pinpoint when we balance the shots. All right, so now let's look at our clips. First, before you start to match a clip like this in the timeline, or any way, you want to look at your Parade and sort of have an understanding and a reading. So understand what is happening in your image. Now here, by the way, you can see that this is brighter now, just because you always change on your options here, how much you want to add the intensity here of your color. So maybe for you, default will be like this, but I prefer like this because I can see better. But either way, it's up to you. So now that we have that, we can see now that our red obviously has a bigger spread. You can see that the highlights go much higher than our green and blue. And the green and red channel are pretty uniform in terms of shadows. They kind of about the same. And then we can see that also the blue channel here the highlights are at the same level with the green. So we have an image that if we look at the reference, right, we can see a striking difference already, that we have a much higher spread. So there is definitely more contrast here, to the point where the red and blue here even get as close as really getting to the 0 point here, which is, as we discussed, pure black, the blackest point in our scope here. And we can see that obviously the green, it's a little bit elevated, but definitely that spread, it's a big difference compared to our image here. So what does that mean? That means that this image is also more contrasty than the one that we have here. You can see that especially in the blue here, our midtones, it's very, very compressed. Just the image as a whole is much more compressed rather than this red having, as I said, a little bit more spread. So now let's start matching the clips, and let me show you ways in which we can get as close as possible and as quickly as possible. Now, remember, as I said earlier, it's impossible to match exactly the contents inside, right, of each channel. That's just not possible. But you can definitely, right, match the highlights, the shadows, and the midtones. So let's do that. So this is the clip that we're matching it to. So then what I'm going to do with this selected, I'm going to right click on the clip that I want as my reference here, and I'm going to say here, wipe timeline clip. So now what happens is that we can see that gets loaded in the viewer, and the clip that we're using now as a reference, it has a blue highlight, which is basically telling us that this is our reference image here. Now, something to talk about is that you have also these options here. You can see that if you want to wipe it, say diagonally or in a different way, you can do that. Let me show you a quick way. So there is a few options here. Now, if you press Command W, what happens here is that we have the ability now to basically toggle and untoggle, as you can see, our image with the reference image here, which is over here. But what some colors do here is that they sort of go all the way like that, and then you can press Shift W, right? So let me show you. So you can go like that. So you put your reference image all the way, something like that. And then you can press Command W here, and then you can toggle very quickly between the reference and your image. So in this case, this is our reference, this is our image. Alternatively, if you don't like it this way, you obviously can just keep it like this. But basically, doing this operation here, which is Command W, is just the same one as clicking, toggling and untoggle this one. That's just a shortcut over there. So now I'm going to keep it in half because we need to match the shots. Then you have the option to press Option and then W, which, as we discussed last time, you can invert where do you want your reference image compared to your selected clip. You can do that as well, just like that. Then the next is to press Shift W. So what you can do with Shift W, you can see here also in the viewer, you're switching between all the different modes within your wipe here, within your image wipe. So now with that said, now let's get started and let's start matching these clips. Now on my selected clip here, first of all, I'm going to rename this node and node label here. I'm going to say match or shot match. And now we have that renamed here. And what we're going to do next, obviously now in the parade, we can see that we have our image here selected on the left. And this is our reference image here. Now, what we want to do, if I started matching it like this, we can make it happen. But the thing is that you can see that our reference image, it's a much wider shot than our own selected clip here, which is a much more, it's a close-up, it's a zoomed in, right, of the mountains. So what we want to do is sort of take those to be around the same size. So we want to zoom in our reference image to match our selected clip here. That way we're able to compare the parades in a much better way, because we're able to see that better and makes for a much better reference. So let me show you how you do that, because it's very simple. What you want to do is you're going to come here on your sizing here, and then you have a few different options here. As you can see, you have sizing, edit sizing, you have your input sizing, you have a few different options. Where you want to come, it's the last one here, which says reference sizing. So now reference sizing refers to you're resizing only the reference image that you're using right here in your color page. And what's happening here is that any sizing, if you zoom in, if you tilt, if you pan, it's not going to affect your clip, your original clip, but just the reference here. So with that said, what I want to do now is to basically take, as I said, my reference clip, this one over here, which is once again highlighted in blue, to get it closer to our selected clip. So let's do that. So I'm going to definitely zoom in to kind of approximate the, so let's go by, so I'm going to also zoom even further. So zoom to around, say, something like 8. So you go all the way in, and then maybe tilt down to about minus, say, 900, something like that. And now you can see that we have a much better match. And then, of course, you can match a little further if you need, something like that. And then you can also pan. So you can pan to kind of get even more. So we'll keep it to, I don't know, something like that. Yeah, it's a pretty good match. So you can see what's happening here. And now we have a much better visual comparison. So we can, even us, when we are correcting this image, it's easier to see with the same size. It's easier for us to say, okay, so I can see the colors better now. So now let's do that and let's match those clips. So the first thing I'm going to do here is to do this with my curves. Now, what we see here is that our reference image obviously has a bigger spread in the red. So we want to start with our red channel first and take it to that level. So we're going to increase our highlights. So in my curves here, I am going to unlink them and grab the red channel. And then I am going to take my highlights, right? And then raise them to match the reference image, looking at the scopes, of course. Now you can see we have something like that. Then you can take your shadows, because we want to match the shadows as well, and take that down as well. Something like that. Great. Now what's happening is that the red, it's great, but the other channels are also not matching. So I'm going to grab the green now. And what I'm going to do with the green, I am going to take that up to start a match, but look what's happening here. Everything is changing. Or even if I take the green and bring it down, see now everything here, it's moving. Now, why is that happening? Why is that happening? Because that makes it basically feels like it's impossible to then match them. Well, that is happening by default inside of Resolve, because the way that operates, so all the red, green, and blue channel, all of them together, they help to improve the brightness or the luminance of your image. So if you're affecting one of the channels, what's happening is that the other channels are now compensating to keep the same brightness and contrast in the image. Now, what does this mean is that this is great if you're doing creative grading, because you don't have to worry about changing the luminance or brightness of your image or the contrast, because, as I said, the other channels are compensating for it. But when you're matching, that is not ideal, because what's happening is that it's compensating with other channels, but is not allowing you now to match all the different channels individually. So now I am going to reset this, and I'm going to show you a quick way on how to solve this problem. So we're going to reset. You can see that we're back to our starting point. And what we're going to do is this option here. If you come here on your primary color wheels here, you can see that we have something called a Lumamix. Now, if you set your Lumamix to 0, now what's happening is that you're able, right, to affect each channel individually without them compensating for each other. Now, you can either set this to 0 here. So I'm going to go and drag it to 0. The alternative way is to come here on your wrench wheel, and then you're going to come on general options, then come down to color here, and you can see you have a few options. Now you can take the luminance mixer default to 0. And if you set that to default, now it's basically like setting your Lumamix to 0, which is great when you're doing shot matching. But as I said, when you're doing creative grading, it is advantageous to have the Lumamix sort of compensating, because you don't have to worry about, as I said, luminance or contrast and other options like that, or saturation. So now with that done, let's do it again. and go back to our red channel, and we're going to take once again the highlights and we're going to drag them to the left, right? So to increase the highlights just like that. And then the next step I'm going to do here, I'm going to take the shadows down and look at the other channels. Nothing now is getting affected, as you can see, which once again, this is optimal when we are shot matching. Now, the next thing we're going to do, once again, is to go back to our green channel here and take that now and lower the green to something like that. Something like that works for us right now. And then the next step that I'm going to do here, I'm going to take my blue also, and I'm going to take that down to something like that. And I can go back to my green here and also increase it. I'm actually here on my sizing reference here, on my clip, I am going to zoom a little further to something like this, so we can have a better view of even further. And then I'm going to also pan a little more here, something like that. Let me come a little bit down because I lost a little bit detail. Okay, so something like that. And now we're back to our matching. So matching our shots. And as I said, now let's take the blue down a little bit. So here, the shadows, something like that. We're very, very close now. But now what's happening is that we can see that for the most part, things are matched, but the colors, right, we have a much better match than compared to earlier. As you can see, this is the before, this is the after. However, what's happening here is that the colors are not matched yet. And why is that happening? Well, it's because now what we are caring about in here, you can see, I can also take this down a little bit, it's that we are looking at our shadows, to matching our shadows, right, and to matching our highlights. But something just as important is to match also the midtones. So we also want to do the midtones as well. And why is that important? It's because if you're matching the midtones, you're going to have a much more matched image as a whole. Now, once again, every time you make a change, you can always go back and see, even increase, something like that. So add a little bit more spread and then take this down, something like that. And you can see we are even closer now. But as I said, the midtones also have to be matched, as you can see here. And you can see that in this area. Now with the red, it's pretty good. We can see it's really nice. And with the blue as well. But with the green now, it's mismatched here, especially since we increase that. So even if I go further, right, I increase my highlights and decrease a little bit. See, now we need to match that a little better. So what I'm going to do here on my green, I'm going to add a point in, right, my midtones, and then I can drag. And looking at the viewer, we can see that now we're getting a pretty strong match between the two clips. And the same, you can do the same with blue. So I can come here. Once again, I can, this is an iteration, so it's a process where you got to keep doing it. Then I can come to my midtones also and adjust that as well. Something like that. And we're at a much better point now. So you can see that if we press Command D, you can see the before and after. I mean, it's a huge difference, as you can see. But we are at a very good match. Now, what's happening here, as I discussed earlier, is that the image, even when we were analyzing it, our reference image is just overall more contrasty than our clip that we're working with. So what I'm going to do, just as a quick one, since this is a minor adjustment, I am going to come here on the contrast and add a bit of contrast to our image. So look at the viewer, what in this case, how that's going to improve and sort of match even a little bit better to our reference image. So I'm going to come here, and now you can see that the magic, it's really happening. I mean, to the point where the images look very close. And you can see this is the before and this is the after. Then again, once you adjust the contrast, obviously it's going to offset a little bit obviously, because you're adding more contrast. So you might want to go back and then adjust a little bit. So you can come here to your reds again and make a minor adjustment. See, something like that, a little bit, or maybe something like that. And then you go back here. So these are adjustments that you could do. But for now, I'm really, really happy with what we have here. Now, something very quick to remember is that once you're done matching your shots, you can come here and uncheck that. So now you can see that our image is not the reference anymore. And you also want to come to our sizing, right? So don't forget this, and then reset it, because what happens is that if you're working on another clip and you want to match them, so you want to add it as a reference, you're going to have by default this setting. So I always suggest to come here and then reset it. Okay, so then in case you want to come back and now say apply, you want to display the wipe timeline clip, now you can see it's back to its default. And this is useful when you're working with other clips, because you don't want to run in that issue where you're like, oh, why is it so zoomed in? What is going on here? Is my color page broken? I've had so many people running through that issue before, so it's always funny. Anyway, so that is a bit about matching the clips, and you could see that now we're a much, much, much closer match. It's really incredible. So you have 3 different ways to do it. You can auto match them the way we showed them in the beginning, and then obviously tweak it a little bit yourself. That is a very good way if you want to, on the fly, do things very quickly, and if you obviously want to have a strong starting point. Then the second way is to do it with stills, just like as we used our match reference shot here earlier. And the third way is the way I showed you, which you can do it through your timeline. Add the clip, and then you can match it using your parades, which is very, very important. Great, so the next thing I'm going to do now is to show you how we can use the split screen inside of our viewer and to compare multiple clips. So let me show you how that works very quickly. So I can come on one of those clips, and I can either click and press Command to select other clips. Alternatively, the other way is to select your first clip, hold Shift, and then range select them. So in this case, there's 4 clips. And now, how do we show them, all of them, in our viewer? Well, it's very easy, because you can come here to your split screen, and then you can see that now only the first selected clip is showing. But if you come here to this drop down, you can see you have a few different options over here. You have a lot available, and you can say selected album, or you could say selected clips, and you have a few different options. So now you can see that all of our selected clips are showing in our viewer. Then you can press Option F to make them even bigger, and then now you can see all your different clips as you selected them from the timeline. Now, why is this useful? It is useful because you can now have a range of clips. Say you're working on a sequence for a scene in a movie, and you have a wide, a close-up, medium shot, so an insert. So in that case, what would happen is that now you can quickly see visually representing your viewer all your different clips. Not just that, but you can see here that the selected clip in this case has this white, right? It's underlined in white here. That means that clip is selected. If I make this smaller, you can see that that's because that's our selected clip. But if I click on this one, you can see that now highlights clip 6 or clip 7, clip 8. And that way you're able to quickly come into your clips and then make adjustments to that specific clip that you've selected, as you can see here. You see that, how it's changing. So it's a very, very easy way to work effectively and very quickly if you want to range select a few clips. And that's it for this lesson. It's a lot that we went through. I truly think that if you have a solid understanding of these first 2 lessons, you are at a very, very, very strong starting point for your grades. Then the next lesson, it's what we're going to talk about how to use secondary grading and how that works, which is also so very important. But the difference between secondary and primary grading is that the steps we've discussed in these first 2 lessons are necessary. They're a priority in every single shot. Most of the time, in most shots, you will have to go through all these steps. Of course, there is moments or clips that maybe you might not need it or as much, but almost always with secondary you would only apply that Okay, you would only apply secondary grading to clips that need it. So not every clip does, and it's obviously depends on the narrative, depends on the genre, depends on many different factors. Okay, so we're going to discuss. We're getting ahead of time right now, but we're going to discuss that in the next lesson.